Your hosts for tonight's special presentation, Steve and Al Albert.
It's been 13 years since the Mets have been able to uncork the champagne, but when they did it in a big way.
Mets won 108 games. No National League team has been more victorious since the Pittsburgh Pirates of 1909.
So while we await the start of the National League playoffs in Houston Wednesday, let's celebrate the accomplishments of these division champions.
Over the next hour, we'll go back and we'll relive some of the season's most exciting moments. From the April launching to the splashdown on September 17th. We'll examine how the selling of the Mets is big business and how the payoff goes well beyond the box office.
We'll look at the differences between New York and Houston, both on and off the field. Ralph Kiner and Tim McCarver will analyze the upcoming playoff series, and then we'll show you how a computer expects it to unfold.
And what would a silver anniversary be without a sentimental journey through the Mets scrapbook, chronicling a memorable era? Of course, we'll also reveal the results of our Met of '86 contest and have the winning player draw the names of some very lucky fans.
So sit back, relax, and enjoy Bring It Home Mets.
Bring It Home Mets is being brought to you by Mitsubishi Motors, respecting the experience. By Budweiser, Beechwood age for that clean, crisp taste. There's Bud's for you. By AT&T, the right choice. By the American Express card, don't leave home without it. And by manufacturers Hanover Trust, we realize your potential.
In any other National League team over the course of the '84 and '85 seasons, the Mets were not quite able to reach that promised land.
So Davy Johnson approached 1986 with a revised prayer. He didn't want to just win the Eastern Division, he wanted to dominate it. Well, the baseball gods must have been listening.
Thou shalt strike swiftly, and bring thy enemies to their knees.
It's April 25th, and the Mets begin a 4-game series in St. Louis with first place at stake. The defending National League champs take a 4-2 lead into the 9th inning with their ace reliever, Todd Worrell, on the mound.
2-2 to Howard Johnson. The Mets need a long ball. They might have it. This ball is out of here, and this game is tied. Oh, my goodness. So much for fate.
That marked the first time in more than a year that the Cardinal bullpen had failed to protect a 9th inning lead. And that really ruffled their feathers. The Mets went on to win that game and the next one. The cards were bending, but not yet broken. They finally came to life in the 9th inning of Game 3 when they cut the Met lead to 1 run and sent Terry Pendleton to the plate with 2 men on base. He hit a shot up the middle, but Wally Backman made a backhand stab and turned it into a game-ending double play. The Mets were doing it with their bats, arms, and gloves, and St. Louis was in shock. Not even John Tudor could stem the tide as New York completed the sweep the following day behind newcomer Bob Ojeda. Though it was only April, the Mets were on top to stay, and the Redbirds were dead birds.
Thou shalt command the respect of thy followers.
Much to the delight of the Mets and their fans, the team just kept winning. Each game seemed to have a different hero. On May 10th, Gary Carter smashed a 2-run homer to nail down a victory over Cincinnati. That gave the Mets a 7-game winning streak and 18 out of 19. The second-place Expos were also on a hot streak, but were being kept at arm's length. And those arms belonged to Dwight Gooden, Bob Ojeda, Sid Fernandez, and Ron Darling. With the season just over a month old, the Big Four of the pitching staff had racked up 17 victories and not a single loss.
Thou shalt wave thy sticks and light the heavens with fire.
On July 3rd, New York City was staging a memorable show for the entire country. The Houston Astros weren't able to watch the patriotic festivities, but they did witness a tremendous 10th-inning fireworks display at Shea Stadium.
Well hit, way back, deep center field. Darryl Strawberry has done it again. A tremendous home run to center field is tied 5-5. My goodness, was that ball smoking.
The delirium hadn't quite subsided when Ray Knight was asked to light the next fuse.
Well hit left field. This ball is out of here, and this ball game is over, and I don't believe it.
Thou shalt part the Red Sea and perform other miracles.
The Cincinnati Reds probably still don't know what hit them on July 22nd. They were leading the Mets by 2 runs with 2 outs in the 9th when the game moved from Riverfront Stadium to the Twilight Zone.
And he hits it to right field. Parker going back. He drops the ball. Both runs score. Hernandez to second, and the game is tied. Unbelievably, Dave Parker drops the final out of the ball game, and the Mets tie the game on the error.
Then in extra innings, Davey Johnson reached into his medicine bag for double-strength relief. He put Jesse Orozco and Roger McDowell in the game at the same time, one on the mound and the other in the outfield. And as the innings passed, they switched off playing the positions. Pete Rose pulled out his rule book to find grounds for a protest, but couldn't come up with any. And as players moved in and out of the lineup, Gary Carter surprised everyone at third base. Finally, after the stroke of midnight, Howard Johnson turned out the lights.
2-2 to Johnson with 1 out and 2 on. And he hits it deep to right field. Parker going back. It's Tater time. This ball's out of here.
Thou shalt not falter in making believers of the West.
On August 27th, the Mets were in San Diego, winding up a 9-game California road trip. They took a 6-5 lead in the 11th inning and then had to hang on against the Padres.
Templeton's coming around to score. Flannery to second. The throw. Out at home. He's out at home. The throw to third. Out at third. The Mets win it 6-5. What a double play.
That fantastic finish gave the Mets 8 out of 9 on their West Coast visit and a huge 20-game lead over the second-place Phillies.
thou shalt capture the Eastern crown and seek greater treasures.
Shortly after 10 p.m. on September 17th, the magic moment had arrived. Dwight Gooden and the Mets were one pitch away from capturing the division title. The champagne was on ice as the team and a capacity crowd at Shea Stadium were ready to celebrate.
Ground ball to second. Backman to Hernandez. On September 17th, the New York Mets become champions of the National League's Eastern Division for 1986.
While this has been an incredible season for the Mets, it has had a few rough spots. But one of the true marks of a great team is how it overcomes adversity. And the first test came very early.
Right. Step off! Now! Watch it! God, dog it!
But God was with Mookie Wilson on March 5th. Even though he suffered a scary injury to his right eye, Mookie came back in May, flirting with a .300 average the rest of the way, while his replacement, Lenny Dykstra, got his share of playing time, too. Dykstra's fiery spirit embodied the all-out commitment the Mets made to winning the division in 1986. And heaven help anybody that got in the way.
As Davis steals third, and Knight in a fight with Davis. Knight hits him with a right cross, and here they come.
That bench-clearing brawl was just one of 4 on-field fights the Mets fought during the regular season. And in Houston, early in the morning of July 20th, Tim Tuffle and Ron Darling got into a scuffle with a couple of cops at Cooter's nightclub. The result of that confrontation will be settled in court later.
Gets a breaking ball, and Foster goes after it. He is struck out.
After more than 4 seasons of a running battle between the fans and high-priced outfielder George Foster, the Mets released him August 6th, a move Foster initially claimed was racially motivated. Ironically, George Foster's spot on the roster was taken by a kid from right here in Brooklyn, Lee Mazzilli, an all-star back in the late 70s who owned this town, a guy who played on some otherwise awful New York Mets baseball teams.
Here during the dog days, if you will say that, and then experience the good years here, and I'm fortunate to be part of it, and I want to enjoy this. This is fun for me right now. I waited 10 years for this.
Here on the eve of the playoffs, just about everybody who swings one of these bats over here appears to be as physically fit as you can possibly be. And after a short but annoying mid-September slump, everybody on this team, at least to me, appears to be as mentally prepared for postseason play as a club can be.
Up next, we'll turn back the clock to the days of those amazing Mets and not so amazing Mets. I've seen it all over the past 25 years. It's been a memorable era filled with jeers, cheers, and even a few tears.
So let's take a little time on this silver anniversary for a nostalgic trip with Matt Schwartz back to the days of Marvelous Marv and Tom Terrific.
Meet the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life.
When National League Baseball fans got to meet the Mets in 1962, it was love before the first loss. For them, it was the best of times, rooting for the worst team of all time. The 62 Mets won 40 games and lost a record 120.
They could have been worse. they were rained out of 2 games. They could have lost 2 more games.
But their fans didn't care about records. They again had a National League team and Casey Stengel as manager.
They make up wonderful placards. The placards are terrific. I even have to stop and look at them. I think I made 15 mistakes this year reading the placards instead of watching the pitcher or watching the hitter.
When the Mets made mistakes in the early 60s, Casey tried to camouflage the mistakes by entertaining the newspaper men, let them write about his exposés, and leave the players alone.
Those lovable losers included Gil Hodges, Don Zimmer, Roger Craig, Duke Snyder, and Richie Ashburn.
It's the first time in professional baseball I'd ever played on a team that was never expected to win a game. And but I've said about that year, I wouldn't want to do it again, but I wouldn't have missed it for anything.
While the amazing Mets finished last or next to last in their first 7 seasons, they were also building a farm system and making smart trades. By 1969, the names had changed to Tom Seaver, Jerry Koosman, Cleon Jones, Tommy Agee, and Bud Harrelson.
We became a good ball club that could beat you in a lot of different ways. And we, unlike the first few years that I played here, instead of beating ourselves, we allowed the other team to beat themselves, which is a complete turnaround.
The turnaround saw the Mets turn the baseball world upside down. In that incredible summer of '69, with manager Gil Hodges making all the right moves, the Mets won 100 games en route to the division crown. They swept Atlanta in the playoffs, and then the magic continued in the World Series against the heavily favored Orioles.
Racing hard is Agee. He is going, and Agee makes it down, big catch,
Ironically, Baltimore's Davey Johnson made the last out as the Mets won the series in 5 games.
Fly ball, deep left field. Jones is back to the fence. Jones is on the warning track. The World Series is over.
But after the celebration, the Mets finished 3rd 3 straight seasons, with Yogi Berra managing and Willie Mays back in New York. 1973 started poorly. It changed when Tug McGraw began screaming during a team meeting with board chairman M. Donald Grant.
And M. Donald's talking about how Mrs. Payson and the entire Mets organization loved every one of us, thought of us as family, and believed in every one of us. Otherwise, we still wouldn't be there. And I jumped up out of my locker. I yelled, "That's right! You gotta believe! You gotta believe!" And all of a sudden, he looked at me like I was crazy.
You gotta believe became the battle cry. The Mets became division champs, then upset Cincinnati's Big Red Machine to win the pennant.
Doug McGraw gets the sign, goes into the motion. Here's the 2-strike pitch. Swung on, hit on the ground toward first. Milner has the ball. Looks to McGraw. It's over. The New York Mets have won the pennant.
The '73 Magic took the Mets to within 1 win of becoming world champs, losing to the powerful Oakland A's in 7. But winning the '73 pennant would actually have a negative long-term effect on the Mets because it deluded chairman of the board M. Donald Grant into thinking the club was stronger than it was. The Mets actually had many weaknesses, and Grant did not spend a lot of money to plug the holes. Many players started saying in the late '70s that the M in M. Donald Grant stood for miser. Grant traded Seaver in 1977, but Doubleday and Company bought the club in 1980, and former Baltimore GM Frank Cashin rebuilt the organization. '84 brought a contender, '86 a division champ. After 25 years, their fans probably agree with the only beat writer who's covered the Mets since their inception, Jack Lang.
I'd love to do it another 25.
Coming up, whether it's books, magazines, videos, or TV, Mets just seem to be popping up everywhere. 3 million fans paid for these seats, and most of them got more than their money's worth.
And the big crowds have meant big bucks to the Met organization. And as Carl Churkin found out, the financial payoff is just part of the story.
If you check your dictionary, you'll find it's full of definitions for the word to win or winning. Words like achievement and success help tell the story. But we wanted to know what a winning season meant to all the diverse members of the Mets extended family.
People in New York are beautiful, and we can't have enough of them coming in here to see the smiles on the faces and the little kids coming through that style. $1 million couldn't buy the look on their faces.
Winning is the Mets, going all the way. A ring for my husband. That's what winning is.
I used to work in the visiting clubhouse in Philadelphia, and I've seen other teams go through this and win, but I'm sure it's when we actually doing it ourselves, it's going to be marvelous.
It is so special. It's just like a dream come true, and it's like we don't want to pinch ourselves to don't wake us up, you know, because we're enjoying it so much.
But things weren't easy back in 1980. When Public Relations Director Jay Horwitz joined the club, he felt like the Rodney Dangerfield of baseball.
Traveling around the league, people used to laugh at you when you said you're from the Mets. They threw Cracker Jacks, hot dogs, and they said, oh, here's Jay Horwitz from the 8th place Mets, 50 games below out of 500. Now they treat you with a little more respect, and I never realized how many friends I had.
Winning is everything. This is what I work for, this is what I live for, this is what I die for.
Fortunately, the staff in the press room at Shea sustains Mets management and the media alike. And does this crew ever love their work?
I've been a Met fan since they started, and I've been working here for 16 years. It gives me great pleasure to see these young players come up, and we're going to do great for the next 5 or 10 years.
As far as I'm concerned, the Mets deserve this season. They've been waiting for it for a long time, and I'm glad I'm part of it.
Okay, that should give us some food for thought. Now, to top things off, what do you think a winning season meant to General Manager Frank Cashin and all the men who helped put this team together?
Winning means being the best, because the best are the winners. And the one thing I've tried to do all my life is to be the very best at whatever I was doing. And so winning at the major league level means that you're the best.
We took a franchise that was not very active, and it was been kicked around by baseball. It was not much in New York, and we made it. And look at the fans that are here. That gives me a sense of great pride.
And then there's all that money that's going to come in when people belly up to the bar to salute the Mets, and they go to our great restaurants, and they go to the theater and the movies and the opera. You know, baseball fans are great opera lovers.
Yes, the mayor has a pretty good point, but these folks have given up their chance to see Madame Butterfly to watch the Mets in action. The long ticket lines represent big crowds, which mean even bigger profits. The selling of the Mets has become an all-encompassing proposition. There's one behind home plate.
You are representing New York City, where there are great opportunities.
Those were prophetic words by the old professor as he addressed the original Mets. And Casey Stengel practiced what he preached. He would set the tone, selling
Metsy,
and everything in between.
Casey on cat food.
I know something about cat food that you don't know.
Casey was the master, so far ahead of his time. But if Casey were here today, he would...
Hey, New York, get on my health kick. Milk. Clean break with Ivory.
But some people go out of their way for the taste of RC.
My first year here, we only was dealing with baseball. This year we're in books, videos, records, movies, comic books, everything. You know, I feel like I work for, like for United Artists instead of...
The most important thing we have to sell are the players themselves. To the extent the players become more familiar to the public likes them better, they have the sense that they're real people they'd like to get to know more about. That's good. That makes them come out to the ballpark more often, watch more games on TV, listen to more games on the radio. That's all plus for us.
I think we lead the league in authors this year. Davy Johnson has a book, Darryl Strawberry, Dwight Gooden. Ron Darling's going to work on a book, and Wally Backman said the other day, he said, you better get working over the winter, but he only started without his own book.
On the top 10 list of videotape sales in the area, the Let's Go Mets music video and the historical and amazing era rank numbers 1 and 2.
This is we have 13 left out of 100 that we received a week ago.
Which one should we get?
At Shea Stadium, souvenir sales is a big business. When Shea opened in '64, there was a choice of about 25 different items. This year, you can select from a list of 125. They stock $1 million inventory.
All these things are just peripheral. The biggest thing to selling these items is that ball club on the field.
You have to be successful on the field, not just because you're a New York Met. There are certain people they identify with success. I was a member of this ball club for 2 years, and I probably didn't have 5 requests in 2 years.
For $5, you can have your picture taken with Gary Carter and Dwight Gooden.
I had my picture taken with President Reagan once for $5, and this is worth it more.
In this market, with the kind of exposure you can get with a successful club, the players actually become bigger than life.
There was a time only the Yankees were bigger than life. Only the Yankees got the call.
I want my maple.
Thanks for flying Brannett, fellas.
When you got it, flaunt it.
Tell 'em, Dally, baby.
Jockey brand white underwear.
Jockey brand color underwear.
White
color.
White.
Today, commercially, New York is a one-team town. The Mets are aware of the overall potential.
Let's go, Mets!
Some other teams are not.
I don't want them preoccupied with speeches and appearances, and if $444,000 isn't enough for them, then they don't belong in the game. They don't need to pick up an extra $1,500 making a speech somewhere until the season's over.
We use them every way we can to help us sell our own product, and I think you really miss a bet if you don't do that.
Sell the game by selling its people. The wisdom of Casey Stengel, passed down and reaping even bigger dividends for the Mets today.
Hello again, everybody. Joe Piscopo, Shea Stadium. The big story, Mets 86. Exciting, thrilling, awesome. Let's take a look.
Return, we'll be in the front row for the naming of the Met of '86.
To right field, and here comes Mookie. Brown up with the ball, and the Mets win it 6-5.
Teamwork, so essential in the Mets' pursuit of the brass ring. But individuality is the catchword in the quest for the gold. And in the competitive world of professional sports, individuality translates into postseason awards, and this current crop of Mets certainly has its share of candidates. Beginning with the Mets' never-say-die catcher Gary Carter and Gold Glove first baseman Keith Hernandez, both vying for the singular most coveted honor in baseball, the MVP, an award Hernandez shared with Willie Stargell back in 1979.
My pride and joy. That's something I'll look at it from time to time in my trophy room. You know, just look at it and go, gee, it's hard to believe that I was actually an MVP one year. It's just something I never dreamed of.
I would like to receive it. It'd be a great honor, but I just feel that this whole season has been an MVP season.
First-year players often dream of becoming Rookie of the Year. If that dream doesn't come true for Kevin Mitchell, he could always invent a new category, Mr. Versatility. Mitchell's played almost every position on the field. He's even done the job off the field.
I'm Kevin Mitchell, seasoned rook, studying all the moves. I'm ready to cook. I got it together. I'm ready to play. I'm up in the big, and I'm hoping to stay.
From versatility to stability. That's what Comeback Player of the Year candidate Ray Knight has brought to the Mets at third base.
Just knowing how far down I was and to have the year that I've had is really rewarding to me, and it's just probably been the best year of my life as far as that goes.
And there's one postseason accolade that one Met would just as soon not win, Manager of the Year.
I think it's a kiss of death. Anytime a guy gets a Manager of the Year, the team seem to go to pieces and they get fired very shortly thereafter. So it's not an award I'm really looking for.
And if there was a Cy Young Award for a pitching staff, the Mets would be hard to beat. Ojeda, Gooden, Darling, and Fernandez all had phenomenal winning percentages, but Mike Scott and Fernando Valenzuela are considered the favorites.
We won't know who will win any of those honors, of course, until after the World Series, but there is a contest we can guarantee a Met will win. It's WOR's Met of '86 competition, and Steve Zabriskie has the results.
Thanks, Al. Well, all during the 1986 season, fans out there had an opportunity to vote for the Met of '86. And the winner for 1986, most deservedly so, is Keith Hernandez. And Keith, on behalf of all the fans who voted for you, I'd like to present you with this beautiful trophy, and you certainly are most deserving after having an outstanding season and also, of course, being one of the important leaders on this ball club.
Well, thanks, Steve. I'd like to take this time to thank all the WOR viewers out there, who are Met fans. I'm very appreciative of this. It's a very great honor for me to win this award, and I thank you very much.
Keith is going to draw from this drum that has cards from all of those of you who voted for him, 5 cards. And those 5 winners will each receive a pair of Mets playoff tickets for 1986. So Keith will give it a little extra spin, and we will draw the 5 winners in the Met of '86 contest. Thank you. First one is Stuart Raymond of Edgemont Place in Teaneck, New Jersey. Next, Alicia Cassiano of Reed Place in Lakewood, New Jersey. The next one is Pamela Rock of 2nd Avenue in New York City. Number 4, Margaret McAleese of Cliffside Avenue in Staten Island, New York. And 5, and finally, L. Faltich of 24th Street, Astoria, New York. And those are the 5 winners who will each receive Mets playoff tickets for voting for the winner, Keith Hernandez, in the Met of '86 contest. And again, thanks and congratulations, Keith.
My pleasure.
Next up, Ralph Kiner and Tim McCarver analyze the upcoming playoffs. And we'll tell the tale of two cities.
Deep in the heart of Texas, that's where I want to be. I want some dark sunglasses and some high-heel boots. I want to be a
National League pennant. That's a far cry from 1962, when both franchises came into being.
There was no divisional play in those early years. It was usually New York and Houston fighting it out for 9th place. One member of the Met family remembers it well.
There was a tremendous, competition between those two teams when they faced each other. And that was the first time they really had expanded in a long, long time. And there was obviously a confrontation there between the two clubs.
Back in those early days, when the Astros were called the Colt 45s, they called the Mets just plain old awful. In fact, through the first 8 seasons, both played in the National League in head-to-head competition. Houston led that series with 87 wins to the Mets' 49. And while Houston wasn't exactly a one-horse town back then, it wasn't the Big Apple. Now, lest anyone think that there are secretly Astros supporters naming streets in downtown Manhattan, we're here to tell you now that that street is Houston Street, not Houston, named for William Houston, a Georgia delegate to the Continental Congress. Got that, Texas? Oh, sure, they've had hard times in Texas, but Houston still got that big oil money, while New York's got Wall Street, which controls the entire world of big business. In Houston, urban and suburban cowboys still wear boots and hats, while high fashion is the passion in New York. Country and Western music is the undisputed king down in Texas, while night after night, New York's rockin' and rollin' till dawn's early light. And in this tale of two cities, the differences go far deeper than the natural turf at Shea and the artificial turf in the Astrodome.
In Houston, you usually live in the suburbs. You got a house, a swimming pool or something like that. New York, it's an apartment or something on the 35th floor. In that sort of sense, you go down to the deli down the street. And in Houston, you might have to drive 30 minutes to get a pizza.
So what we have here is a confrontation between two very talented ball clubs representing two distinctly different cities. And when it comes down to analyzing this series, your preference might just come down to a question of style.
Baseball fans throughout the country tonight are analyzing the upcoming confrontation between the Mets and the Astros. So let's turn to our resident experts, Ralph Kiner and Tim McCarver, to find out what they expect in the playoffs.
Well, Houston against the Mets. And in the regular season, Tim, the Mets won 7 of the 12 games played. But if you want to look at it a little bit differently, they lost the last 3 to the Houston Astros.
And Bob Knepper, one of those games, he pitched a shutout.
Of course, the Mets have been renowned for their pitching, especially with Dwight Gooden having the year he had last year, 24-4. But this year, Dwight isn't that dominant pitcher. And, of course, the fellow that's come on for Houston has been Mike Scott, who has led the major leagues in strikeouts.
It's interesting that if pitching dominates the series, then I think it'll be a tie. I don't think it'll ever end because both clubs have super pitching staffs. The Astros this year are a different ball club because primarily of Kevin Bass having the type of year he had, the coming on strong of Glenn Davis, who really is the only power hitter, the only real power hitter on that ball club, even though Bass had a good year too.
Another thing about the Houston Ball Club, their catching it's really underrated. They handle it real well, and Ashby, of course, has learned how to throw well, and again, you got to look at stolen bases.
Of course, New York with Dykstra and Wilson and Strawberry can steal bases, but I don't think they have the overall speed that Houston has. Interesting side note is when the Houston Astros played the Mets, Gary Carter wasn't throwing well. Sure. And Gary Carter really came on the last 2.5 months of the season as far as his throwing was concerned. So if Houston thinks that they can run on Carter like they did earlier in the season, I think they're going to be mistaken. And that, of course, is why the scouts were scouting the Mets the last half of the season. But Carter throwing extremely well the last 2 months.
And the other thing, the Mets pitchers certainly do hold runners on well. Even Dwight Gooden has gotten to the point where he is not a patsy on the stolen base. And relief pitching in the situation, now we get down to what might be the final answer of the whole series with the Houston Astros, relief pitching.
Roger McDowell 0-3 against Houston this year.
Although doing exceptionally well against the league, and Roger in a little bit of a slump at the end of the season for the New York Mets. He had some problems getting people out. His sinker wasn't sinking as well, so that'll be interesting. The other thing, too, is Jesse Orozco. Now, Jesse is sort of a emotional type pitcher.
Orozco did pitch extremely well in the second half of the season, and I think his confidence is very high going into the series. On the other hand, the Houston Astros with Dave Smith, who's one of the stoppers in the league. He's good for an inning to 2 innings, and that's it. And I think that's the guy that you will see in there. But if you remember, Dave Smith came in the 9th inning of that Sunday game, the last game played by the Mets and the Astros, and Darryl Strawberry touched him up for a tying home run.
I would say that it's going to be the Mets in 7 games, and I think it's going to be won by Keith Hernandez with either a sacrifice fly or a base hit.
Man, you are really sticking your neck out.
I got it right down there.
I think Mookie Wilson's going to be the key for the Mets. I think it's going to be very, very close all the way. I think it's going to go 7 games. I think the Mets will win it. But I think Mookie Wilson's going to be the key, because I think Nepper's going to be in there, and I think Mookie Wilson's going to be the guy to drive in the winning run in Game 7.
When we continue, we'll cap off the program with the computer's playoff prediction.
Battling for the National League pennant in less than 48 hours, and that means millions of baseball fans are going at it in offices, living rooms, and neighborhood bars. They're debating the possible scenarios and the eventual outcome.
And instead of seeking out those differing opinions, we decided to take a more scientific approach. We turned to our friends at Quest Incorporated, the developers of Pure Stat Baseball, and asked them to come up with a computer program for the playoffs.
Well, they fed all the statistical data and probable managing techniques into the computer, and then they let the computer play the series. And now, the highlights of the computerized results, as you might see this coming week on News 9 Prime Time.
It was Dwight Gooden against Mike Scott in Game 1 at the Astrodome tonight, and the confrontation lived up to everyone's expectations. The fans were noisy during opening ceremonies, but the doctor quieted them down. The Astros were struggling at the plate while the Mets kept threatening but failing to score. Then in the 8th, Bill Doran reached third with 2 out, and Glenn Davis nailed a Gooden fastball. Trailing 2-0, the Mets put the tying runs on base for Keith Hernandez in the 9th. But it was Kevin Bass to the rescue. So despite giving up 10 hits, Mike Scott shuts out the Mets, and Houston takes the lead in the best-of-7 series.
In what was almost a replay of Game 1, pitching again dominated as Nolan Ryan and Bob Ojeda locked in a pitching duel at the Astrodome. Despite allowing only 1 hit, Ojeda gave way to pinch hitter Howard Johnson with the game scoreless in the 8th. Hojo singled. Len Dykstra moved him to second, and Charlie Kerfeld was brought in to face Wally Backman with 2 out. Backman came through with his 4th hit of the series, and the scoring drought was finally over for the Mets. Leading 1-0 in the bottom of the 9th, Roger McDowell ran into trouble. With 1 out, Davey Johnson called in Jesse Orozco from the bullpen to face Kevin Bass with runners on 1st and 3rd. So the Mets able to get that all-important split in Houston and come home to Shea for the next 3 games.
The day of rest traveling from Houston to New York apparently helped the hitters, as we finally got to witness some scoring in Game 3 of the playoffs. The Mets jumped on Astro starter Bob Nepper in the 3rd inning. Kevin Mitchell and Keith Hernandez drove in the first 2 runs, and Gary Carter belted the ball over the center field fence to put the finishing touch on a 4-run rally. But Ron Darling weakened in the middle innings, and the Mets were leading 5-3 in the 8th. The Astros loaded the bases, and Kevin Bass again had the chance to be a hero. But Keith Hernandez rewrote the script. The Mets celebrate their homecoming and take a 2-1 lead in the best-of-7 series.
With the Astros trailing 2-1, manager Hal Lanier changed his pitching rotation today. He brought back his ace, Mike Scott, to go on only 3 days rest. And it showed, as Gary Carter smacked his second 2-run home run in as many days, and that put the Mets on top 3-1 in the 5th inning. But Jose Cruz drove in a run in the 6th, and Sid Fernandez pitched himself into even bigger trouble in the 7th. Phil Garner singled in Billy Hatcher, and that tied the game. And with Jesse Orozco and Roger McDowell heating up, Fernandez took on Glenn Davis. And Davis smashed the ball to deep left center, just missing a home run, but giving the Astros a 4-3 lead. He didn't miss the next time up, hitting a 2-run shot off of McDowell to lock up the Houston victory. Mike Scott seemed to get stronger as the game went on. Hal Lanier's gamble paid off. Scott notched his second win and knotted the series at 2 games apiece.
The pitching for New York and Houston has been nothing short of remarkable in this playoff series. The first 2 games were shutouts, and there was a load of goose eggs on the Shea scoreboard this afternoon. Dwight Gooden, the hard luck loser in Game 1, pitched to only 21 batters, the minimum, over the first 7 innings. But the Mets couldn't get anything going against Nolan Ryan, who was pitching on 3 days rest like Mike Scott the day before. By the 9th inning, the relievers had taken over, and the Astros were rallying to break the scoreless tie. With 2 outs and runners on second and third, Denny Walling singled to center, scoring Glenn Davis. But Lenny Dykstra cut down Kevin Bass at the plate. Unfortunately for the Mets, the 1 run was enough as the Astros took a commanding 3-2 lead as the series now moves back to the Astrodome.
It was do or die for the Mets tonight, and they pinned their hopes on Bob Ojeda, their 18-game winner. The Houston fans packed the Astrodome, eagerly awaiting the kill. The pressure was on the Mets, but they certainly didn't show it. And rookie Kevin Mitchell was the loosest of all. His 3rd-inning double off of Bob Nepper produced the first run of the game. He'd get 3 more hits before the night was over. Ray Knight drove in the second Met run, and Darryl Strawberry and Keith Hernandez both entered the game batting only .157, but they teamed up for this score in the 5th inning off of Jim DeShays. So they had to put the champagne away in the Astro clubhouse as the Mets held on for a 3-1 victory. And yes, it's all coming down to the 7th game.
The big story, the 7th game of the playoff series and the crowning of the National League champions. Ron Darling on the mound for the Mets, and Mike Scott trying to become the first pitcher to win 3 games in league championship play. It didn't take long to see this just wasn't Scott's day. Dykstra and Backman opened the game with hits, and then Gary Carter unloaded the biggest home run of his career. Houston scored a run of the 7th, and the season came down to a 9th-inning rally. And it was a Met rally as Mookie Wilson singled in Ray Knight and Howard Johnson to secure the victory. So the Mets come from behind to capture the last 2 games in Houston and move on to the World Series. And Gary Carter, with his 3 homers and 9 RBIs, is named MVP of the playoffs.
And that's the way the computer sees it. Fan reaction around these parts, probably smart computer. Actually, many baseball experts believe this will be a grueling series that could very well be decided in the 7th game.
That's true, and of course, win or lose, this has been a tremendous season for the Mets and their fans. If the computer is right, the Mets are headed for the future against the Boston Red Sox or California Angels.
Thanks for joining us.
Good night.
Bring It Home Mets has been brought to you by Manufacturers Hanover Trust. We realize your potential. By Burger King. This is a Burger King town. We know how burgers should be. By Mitsubishi Motors, perfecting the experience. And by Bud Light, the light beer with a first name and taste. Everything else is just a light.